Hello, my name's Eric Crump. I'm with the Homewood-Flossmoor Chronicle. Welcome to Meet the Candidates, our interview series introducing candidates who will be on the ballot Election Day, April 1st. Today we're talking with Crystal Cleggett, who's running for the Flossmoor District 161 Board of Education. And Crystal, thank you so much for being with us. Welcome.
Thank you, Eric, for having me this afternoon.
Why don't you start by just telling us a little bit about your decision to run? Why did you decide to give this a try?
So one of the reasons that I decided to run is I'm an actively engaged and involved parent inside of my children's education. And by being that parent, I wanted to understand some of the things that they experience as far as like what they face. And honestly, I got involved initially through the PTO with Heather Hill. And so from being involved with the PTO through Heather Hill, then I gain more understanding of what was happening inside of the board meetings. So as other questions and concerns that I recognize were beyond Heather Hill, I'm a social worker by profession. And so in order to do social work, we say you need to be a social worker. And so my thing was, in order to work for change for District 161, I needed to be a part of the process for change for 161. And so that influenced not just my role as a parent, but some questions and concerns that I recognize were not being answered, not specifically for me, but that I recognize from others in the community in regards to the district.
Okay. I'm glad you mentioned your profession. Something that's been a big issue for schools in recent years, especially since the pandemic, was a concern about the social and emotional health of students and staff and administrators, everybody. And I know that there's been a focus on that recently, and I wondered, one, if you think the district is doing enough, going in the right direction, whether there are ideas you have for things the district could do differently or better in that regard. And maybe to pick a specific instance, the Parker, I think, recently, or earlier this year, banned cell phone use in the classroom, which is connected to that social and emotional health as well as attention. How is the district doing in that regard, do you think?
So one thing that I can say is this: our district has a lot of resources, and what I really would like for our district to do is to identify what resources are actually necessary for our students. So speaking on the phone ban, I am not against that. I recognize that most of us, we have access to things just right at our disposal, right? And so children, they typically want to know what's going on, how many likes they got on TikTok or YouTube or whatever is happening on Snapchat or any of the platforms that they use. So I actually like the fact that they're actually able to focus on their education and they can leave the social part outside of school other than the communication that they have with each other. Now that's the part that I feel our children could definitely do better on. And so I do recognize that the district brought in City Year as part of that. And so I am an advocate for additional services, whether it's in school or after school, for social and emotional support. So I believe that City Year, them bringing them in, was actually a good thing. And so that's looking at how students process their emotions during that time. Our teachers are there to educate, right? But our children may have so many other things that are going on outside of just what they're there to learn for. And having that City Year person inside of a classroom that where the child may be slightly disruptive, but being able to talk to them and say, hey, what's going on with you today? Normally you're a little bit more bubbly, or you seem a little sad, or you're agitated. What's that about, right? Without the teacher having to quickly send them over to the dean or send them to the assistant principal. So I do believe in that aspect that the district is actually doing really good in having City Year there.
Yeah, and that may apply to another problem that's been a community concern for recent years, and that is discipline problems in the schools. Do you think that program or others can make a difference with helping students' behavior during the school day?
So I think everyone has to have a buy-in when it comes to discipline and understanding what the discipline is supposed to be. So for example, we what actually are the ramifications? I know students in the elementary school levels, they have these write-ups where they have to process and write about what the incident was. When parents come into our school district, are they informed? Like, so if after so many write-ups, this means they go to the assistant principal, or this means they meet with the social worker, this is when we bring you in, or do we bring you in initially? Like, what do teachers know as far as like if they can contact a parent? So I can say personally, I let all teachers at every single school my children have ever been in, I say, hey, if there's an issue or concern, please reach out to me. I know that I work. I may not be able to answer right then and there. However, I do want to support you. And so I think that it is beneficial when it comes to discipline for teachers to know that they have parent support, parents to know that they have teacher support, but in all honesty, everyone to actually know what the discipline is. And so when you review the district's website, in regards to discipline, it gives you the standards of like what actually happens if a child has an in-school or out-of-school suspension. My concern is that inside of the classroom, there may be a lot of warnings, right? And parents, at least from what I've heard from some parents, will say they had no idea that something was happening to their child or that their child was the one doing something, right? And so how long do we take before we bring in that support system to actually understand like how we can better support this child in their learning and what's happening? I think those are things that I would like to hear improve. And like I said, I've heard that across the elementary school as well as for Parker as well.
Okay. So the process of engaging parents when to do that and how maybe is something that could be improved some.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That actually brings up another issue I was planning to ask you about, which is a broader engagement and inclusion question, which is how the district can bring the community into conversations. And I know they all of our institutions work hard to reach out, but there's still people who feel like they weren't included or they didn't get the word, and it's a big challenge. And I thought you might have ideas about that.
Okay, so for me, I personally like focus groups. And this is what I mean, is that we have a particular topic. We want to work with a group of parents who are also interested in that topic. And we facilitate a process from those focus groups where we understand, like, in general, what parents may be thinking. And so and it's not even just parents, but it's also like what the community may be thinking. So some of the things that I can say that we definitely more improvement on, we are a working community. Our parents work. Our guardians work. As a result, most of those things typically happen with them working during the day. They have to do after school things, homework, what have you, in the evening. So when we think about when we do things, a 3:30 for a community engagement meeting on a Wednesday does not help parents who could actively be engaged with the district. Those are things like that need to change if we want to engage the community. Also, it's unfortunate when you ask the community to come to a board meeting, but it's not a transactional conversation. So that goes back to my goal of like, what if we have like a focus group? Parents, this is something that is going to affect you. This is something that is going to affect the community. As a district, we want your input, but if in a board meeting, it's not a transactional conversation, how do you really get parents' input? So what you get is a community and parents equally frustrated because they're not being heard. And then you also get the district and teachers and those who are like, we're saying something. Yes, you are. But if we're not communicating to come to an understanding, something in the middle, then it's like none of us have proven our point other than we're not communicating at that point.
Yeah, it's tough, but finding new ways to bring people together might help bridge that.
I would
right?
love for new opportunities and new ways for us to be able to bridge that, because I find also that our parents are actively involved with their children. I don't know what the district's concept of engagement is. However, if you've gone to a function out of any of the schools, those parents are at their children's functions, right? So we know that parents are involved, so much so that when you hear of the orchestra, they're limiting parents. Can we have 2 people per household to come because they're actively involved? So my thing is, if we are reaching our parents. It's just other ways that we can reach them to bring them together for those concerns around what we need to do to help to continue to educate our children.
Yeah. Good problem to have, it sounds like, having all those parents at functions. I wanted to shift gears a little bit here. A couple of things that are responsibilities of school boards are managing the finances, managing the facilities. They go together because you have to have enough money to run your schools and keep the buildings going, right? And so I wondered if what your assessment is of the district's situation in terms of facility upkeep and maintenance. We've got a project going on at Heather Hill now, and whether or not you think the plan for the future is appropriate, or if you have any thoughts about how that could be changed or improved.
Well, looking at in regards to Heather Hill, to my understanding, they do have the smaller kindergarten classrooms in comparison to some of the other schools. So to me, what that said is that our population is also growing. So that pre-K that are at other schools sounds like we may have more possibly at Heather Hill, and we want that space for those bubbling minds to be able to grow and to learn. So I definitely agree that an expansion is something that was needed. Our territory, however, is limited at Heather Hill right now. So as we consider the future and expanding, I think that we also need to consider how our buildings operate. So not that this is something that the district has said, but I'm a person that if, let's say, as a community, we continue to grow, and especially at that elementary school level, what does it look like for grade centers? Because then we could maximize the space that we have within those different schools, where one school was pre-K and kindergarten, another one first and second grade, and things like that. I think that'll also build upon things in the future. I don't know that we're right there just yet. However, as we're going, I think those are things we may need to consider if we do not have the landscape to be able to expand our buildings. When I think about how the facilities function, we also need to say, what is it that we want our children to learn inside of each of these buildings in order for it to function the way it does for them?
Okay. Slightly related, another facility, I guess, was not a school board or a school district project, but a village project. But it was right next to a school, and that is the Heather Hill Detention Basin, which the school board enabled by conveying the land to the village. So that created, as you know, quite a bit of concern among Heather Hill residents, especially. But it's built now, and I wondered what you see as the board's responsibility going forward for how to help the school and the basin coexist safely. Do you have ideas for what can be done to?
Well, now that it's been provided to the village, I'll just say I find that the board has relinquished the majority of its rights to the village. So I know that they're still working on whether or not we're going to actually be able to have cameras at the detention basin. The concern has been that there are kids who are still climbing over the fence, right? And so this isn't the construction fence. This is the black fence that is up and around the school. Is that, we recognize that was something that would happen. What does it look like to have cameras? Because that detention basin being around, I think they say like 20 feet deep possibly like at the center's core, when it's night outside, even though the parking lot and the side of the schools is lit up, you can't see into that detention basin. And not that, I don't know, I'm honestly, middle of the night, I'm asleep. I don't know what some people are doing. However, being able to have like early evenings when it's still dark, to have children covered as far as like some type of sensor to let us know that there was some activity back there, so that way at least it's monitored. Now, if it's something that they find that, oh, this doesn't happen, then they can decide that, you know what, things are still safe. Let's move forward. We can remove the cameras. But I also believe that that is something that they still need to consider. I know that it was an issue brought back up to the board, and the board acknowledged that since they did provide the responsibility to the village, then that is something that they ultimately still need to consider. But to my understanding, they're waiting to see what the village says.
Okay, got it. There's two last topics I'd like to bring up. One, and they're both kind of difficult. So what we're interested in really is just in your thoughts about how the board could play a role in helping the community, basically. And one is property taxes, which schools need property taxes to function, and they take up a pretty good portion of the property tax bill. And the property tax bills have been going up. So people are really struggling to pay them. So that puts the school board in kind of a difficult position. And I didn't know if you had thoughts about how to help the community understand the district's needs, and maybe how to advocate for improvements in the property tax system, or how to fund government.
So some of the things that I think about when it comes to property taxes is essentially people are willing to pay the property taxes when they see where their money is going. However, when we look at our state scores, and people who do not have children, they live in the community, they're like, okay, so what am I paying exactly for? So those are things that the district can work on highlighting as the strength of the district in what we're doing. But part of that is improving those test scores so that those other families are like, I want to move into this community because this is a great district to be able to live in. And so the other could be like the way that they engage the community. I know that HF does a thing with seniors, so there's seniors with the seniors in the community. That is something that the district could actively get involved in as far as when it comes to Literacy Month. Who do we engage inside of the community, right? Each school can come up with something where the community is engaged, what different activities that we have. To my understanding, years ago, a long time ago, before I was here, some community members in Heather Hill spoke on actually being able to come to the school and actually read and what that looked like. Now, I think when people can see, like, oh, kids are doing good, and and they're actively playing, and this is what the grounds are being used for, then they understand that. So I think we need to make things more tangible and visual for community members to recognize like where their money is going. And yes, definitely, if we can work with the county on what the property taxes are and what the values are, then and help them to understand that. But I also know that people want to see where their money is going at the end of the day.
That's absolutely true. Yeah. What am I getting? Another topic that's also something that locally we have limited influence over, but it's still going to be important, it appears, is the changes at the federal government since Donald Trump was inaugurated. And a couple of things that they're doing may have a more direct impact on schools. One is pretty much eliminating references to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And another is potentially eliminating the Department of Education, which is not a huge source of funding, but it is a source of funding. And it's also a source of support for vulnerable children. So I wondered what you thought about, as those changes are happening, what can the board do to help the community navigate these difficult times?
Well, one thing is, I think the board has to let the community know exactly what this means, right? So understanding that although there are limited funds from the federal government, an IEP, which is an individual education plan for a child who is, according to state standards and guidelines, unable to meet that particular learning opportunity, they're able to work with the social worker, work with the teaching staff, and they have a team that works with them to identify what resources are needed to help them meet those particular needs. we may need to do more as a board in letting families know how these things could possibly affect them, but also what the district is doing in order to not allow that to affect their children, right? So we may say that, you know what, we still do have our social workers. We're not letting them go, but this is what we need from parents. This is how we can have parents engaged. I know that during COVID, one of the things that I greatly appreciated about the district was the fact that even though they were out during the summer when they normally have like their summer learning and readiness program, what they did was they identified things on their website for learning opportunities. So even if that's something, I know they still kind of do something similar where some teachers will send parents home with additional work for their kids, but that may be something that as a district that we may have to step up on, is saying, hey parents, in the event, here are some opportunities, or like what resources are in the community. So if we need to partner with other social service agencies or community social workers, so that way we can figure out how we can support our social workers to help the families. But I do think we at least need to make sure that we're acknowledging that this is a possibility that we can be affected.
All right. Thank you. Last word is yours. We've talked about some big issues, but there may be things that you think are really important for the community to know about you and about what you would bring to the board that we haven't talked about. So let me know what else we should
So
tell
one of the
people.
things, so three things, some of it we have talked about, but accountability. And so accountability, I find that I feel like we need to act as a board. So accountability is, for me, us really looking at why our students aren't meeting the state standards. I know that I'm a cheerleader, a champion for standards-based grading and standards-based learning. I can appreciate the district going that route in understanding what it is that the state is looking for and figuring out what it is that our students need in order to be able to do that. I also want that there to be benchmarks. And I say benchmarks because I find that I'm hearing parents wanting to understand where their child is supposed to be by a particular point, and that's the feedback that they aren't getting back. So when I'm saying accountability is when we set out these plans, when we implement these new curriculums and we're putting that out there, then we can give parents an idea for where they're supposed to see their children. And I will say, the information is there. It's just how parents are able to navigate it. So I may be a little bit old school from when I was younger to when we were brought in and we were kind of given a step-by-step process. We didn't have all this digital media where you click on here, do a QR code and everything like that, but we actually had someone verbally talking to us. And I think that's one of the things with community engagement that we're missing, is that we're not having that transactional conversation with our administrators, with our teachers, and it seems like everything is rushed and everyone is in a place, and it's like if you click this QR code you can go on this site and then ask a question. And some parents may feel like, I have a lot of education, I shouldn't be able to ask this question, I should know this, I should be able to understand it, and sometimes they don't. And so just being able to have that part in regards to the engagement, I think can improve our district so much more. Also, my last thing is with the transparency between the teacher, parent, and child buy-in. Do we all know exactly what is expected of us in the district? And so looking at our teachers prepared, not just with the lesson plans and the curriculum for what they're supposed to teach our children. Do our teachers know how to reach our children? Do our parents know what our teachers need to be able to reach our children? Do parents know what they need to be able to reach their children based upon the particular topic or discussion? I know that we get like a list of questions to ask your kids at like the beginning of the school year. Like, don't just ask, how was your day, and things like that. But not just that question, but looking at opportunities in which to facilitate constant learning. Like, parents, this is what we're going over during the week. Here are some helpful hints in order to pull out that particular information. I've asked my kids several different ways a particular question, and I'm trying to figure out what they understood. And I'm like, think I'm just as confused as they were. So I'll email a teacher and say, hey, I need to understand a little bit more, because some of the curriculum doesn't require that they have the books. It may be digital. So then it's also reminding your kid, hey, bring home your computer. So just even that particular emphasis of saying, hey, now that we're with Chromebooks, like, parents, this is where you're going to find this information if your child doesn't have a book, if they don't actually have the physical piece of paper. I think if we build upon that more, then our district can soar in so many other ways. And I'm excited to be a part of that.
Terrific. Well, thank you so much, Crystal. We really appreciate you spending time with us today and explaining some of your ideas. We wish you the best of luck on April 1st.
Thank you so much, and I appreciate you having me.
Okay.